Well, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us what you say, very reliable law enforcement source told you about a possible suspect in the case.
Sure. So after almost 4 decades in this business, I've collected a few friends at the FBI and in local law enforcement all over the country. And the source that I have is impeccable. And he said that not only were the cameras smashed, plural cameras smashed, so that the suspect likely knew about the locations of them, but that the car belonging to the sister of Savannah Guthrie, Annie Guthrie, was towed, impounded, and taken into evidence. And this is the wording. It's very important. The wording is very important. He said they now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
That security feed didn't just drop from a dead power grid. It didn't glitch out. Nobody hacked it from afar. A person strolled right up to the porch of an 84-year-old lady's place at 1:47 a.m., tore that smart cam completely off the siding using nothing but brute force, and vanished into the shadows with it. That stands as the initial verified piece of evidence here rather than some wild guess or crazy speculation. It is an absolute truth backed up by federal lab experts and publicly verified by the Pima County Sheriff during a recent media briefing. Moreover, this completely flips the script on whatever you believed occurred afterward. See, right here is the main inconsistency driving this entire probe. The guy caught on tape during that late evening, the very same individual whose face got plastered across police updates and evening television, catching the eyes of countless viewers, didn't actually represent the full picture. In reality, he might have just been a complete distraction. Based on police insiders quoted by Fox News, journalist Michael Ruse, federal cyber units dedicated roughly 10 days collaborating alongside tech executives to extract leftover digital traces from that exact home monitor. The files they retrieved from those servers contained way more than just clips from the evening. She vanished. Detectives uncovered snapshots dating back to January 11th, 3 weeks prior. The identical person of interest standing at that exact entryway. 0 bags, 0 firearms, 0 tactical rigs, absolutely nothing on him. He didn't show up that winter evening to make a move. He simply showed up to observe. Therefore, if that identical guy returned 3 weeks afterward, totally geared up and arrived completely aware of, the precise entry point the mystery detectives desperately need to solve goes beyond his true identity. The real puzzle is who tipped him off that the lock would be undone. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years of age. The woman relies on everyday cardiovascular prescriptions. Based on what? Sheriff Nanos shared she can't travel 50 yards without physical support. She resides completely by herself in Tucson, Arizona. She relies on a cardiac implant. On January 31st, 2026, she returned from supper at her kid's place, strolled inside via the carport, and vanished into thin air. 46 days later, there's 0 verification she is still breathing. Stick around because what those devices failed to record merely scratches the surface of what detectives eventually brought to light. You are tuned into American Cold Case. Files and this particular mystery remains wide open. 3 weeks prior to her going missing, an unknown figure lurked on Nancy Guthrie's front porch under the moonlight and essentially just waited. 0 knocking, 0 effort to breach the lock. Absolutely 0 logical explanation provided so far. Say, on police contacts verified by Fox News, advanced microchip teardowns of the stolen hardware managed to salvage a picture from that Saturday, January 11th. The silhouette captured in that frame carried 0 luggage, 0 firepower, 0 hardware whatsoever, merely a pole lurker hiding in the shadows outside a solitary senior's residence, lingering long enough to get caught on a surveillance lens. They eventually smashed to pieces. Nancy Guthrie relocated out to Tucson, Arizona specifically to stay close to her kid, Annie. She heavily relied on that closeness. Her medical condition demanded it. Based on Sheriff Nanos, she couldn't cover 50 yards. Unassisted, she swallowed cardiovascular pills on a daily basis. A medical device sat surgically implanted within her torso, constantly tracking. Biological rhythms silently beaming that information straight to the medical company's database 24/7, completely disconnected from cell phones, completely untethered from local Wi-Fi setups. The gadget maintained an independent log of her vital signs, regardless of her awareness. Her routine out in the desert followed a strict pattern familiar to her inner circle. During Saturdays, Sundays, and Friday nights, she frequently hung out over at Annie's place. She'd eat play cards and stay late. On the evening of January 31st, she followed that exact script. Just a peaceful night surrounded by relatives identical to her weekly habits. Her daughter's husband, Tommaso, gave her a lift back. He parked inside the structure right at 9:48. The bay doors lowered at 9:50, and he took off. That routine was hardly a secret. It was literally her normal existence. Based on journalist Brian Anton, federal investigators returned to Nancy's community on day 45 of the search and started grilling residents regarding any hired hands or maid services that might have been granted entry into local properties. The inquiry was incredibly specific, highly focused. Those extortion letters popping up shortly following her abduction actually mentioned a couple of highly specific things regarding her indoor layout, which detectives purposely kept completely under wraps. Specifically, the precise spot she left her Apple Watch alongside a busted exterior bulb behind the main house. These 2 points got verified by FBI operative Heath Jenica, then broadcasted by KOL News 3 and TMZ. That level of inside awareness simply isn't gained by lingering on the lawn and peeking through the blinds. Then we have the sketchy situation involving the adjacent property's surveillance. Based on Brian Enton's journalism combined with statements from locals living nearby, the doorbell monitor owned by the folks living straight across her backyard inexplicably lost connection the exact evening she vanished. Those locals claimed they never once received a connection error alert from the hardware until that specific evening. One federal contact, per reports from the same journalist, called the timing incredibly suspicious. Authorities haven't provided any formal excuse. January 11th was a Saturday. January 24th, another. Specific timeline: federal officials subsequently interrogated locals regarding digging for any bizarre happenings going down around the block fell on, which happened to be a Saturday too. Detectives definitely picked up on this trend. That final Friday night, Nancy Guthrie had dinner with her daughter. Her pills remained back at her house. Her heart device kept tracking. Whoever lurked in the shadows, as her garage closed, had clearly been stalking the place for a while. The final verified picture we have of Nancy captures her garage shutting. The time reads 9:50 p.m. on January 31st, 2026. Tommaso Chion had recently dropped her off. Security cameras catch the exact second the shutter drops shut. From then on, it is complete silence. We see absolutely zero outside activity, zero extra video from that angle, and absolutely no movement logged for the following 4 hours. Then exactly at 1:47 a.m. things change. Right at 1:47 a.m., the porch lens suddenly disconnects. Based on federal reports later backed up by Sheriff Nanos, it was not an electrical outage or some wireless hacking attempt. Someone literally ripped the security gadget right off the exterior brick and walked away with it. The culprit never bothered slicing the electricity. There was absolutely no effort to cause a digital blackout. Instead, they just strolled right up to the porch, dead in the night, tore down the lens setup using their bare hands and took off. Later at 2:12 a.m., another sensor nearby detected someone walking past. It caught zero visuals, just recording the exact hour. A presence was there. By 2:28 a.m., Nancy's heart monitor lost connection to her cell phone. This implant automatically links up whenever she stays close by. Sheriff Nanos noted that precisely at 2:28 a.m. the signal failed. Her internal tracker kept sending medical details straight to the company cloud like normal. However, Nancy had clearly moved over 30 feet away from her mobile. Her smartwatch remained sitting indoors. The crucial cardiac pills she needed were also untouched inside. Sheriff Nanos pointed out how she abandoned everything. Nobody bagged those items up. Nothing got touched at all. At 2:36 a.m., a doorbell lens owned by someone living 2.5 miles from Nancy's place spotted a mystery car. That video proved the ride was definitely driving through the area. Back then, even reaching day 46 of this search, police still refused to officially release the brand, exact style, or tag details. Relatives eventually dialed 911 that afternoon. Cops arrived at 12:15 p.m. February 1st. What detectives uncovered by the main doorway turned into a heavily scrutinized piece of forensic proof for this whole mystery. based on statements from Sheriff Nanos later, reviewed by Dr. Michael Benn along with federal expert Jim Clemente. Red stains spotted the porch. Those splatters formed perfect circles. They dropped straight down exactly how crime scene texts describe a bleeding wound that isn't moving. Investigators found 0 shoe tracks mixed into the puddles. Genetic testing eventually proved those bodily fluids belonged directly to Nancy Guthrie. Soon, the extortion letters showed up that afternoon. The initial message got uploaded to a web tip line at Cole News 13 in Tucson, which federal investigator Heath Janicki verified. Extra demands popped up by February 2nd, hitting the inbox of TMZ plus various media. Their price tag hit $6 million in cryptocurrency. The initial cutoff landed on February 5th. Another followed for February 9th. Ultimately, those dates expired with 0 cash exchanged, 0 replies, and absolutely no legitimate proof showing that Nancy Guthrie survived the ordeal. However, the letters included specific trivia that detectives simply could not ignore. The writer pinpointed exactly where Nancy left her smartwatch indoors while also mentioning a busted security bulb out in the rear yard. Those were 2 extremely precise facts. 2 pieces of evidence kept completely secret from reporters. 2 things that only an actual intruder would realize. Around February 5th, feds busted 42-year-old Derek Kayla, a guy living over in Hawthorne, California. He shot over fake extortion texts to Annie and Tommaso through a masked digital line. The authorities tracked these alerts right back to a Google inbox tied to his identity. Federal officials stated that Kala completely lacked any ties to the real kidnapping. He just watched the media coverage and decided to involve himself for attention. The guy faced charges for the stunt. However, the author behind the genuine letters definitely wasn't Derek Kayla, the suspect who spotted the digital watch, plus the busted exterior bulb, who actually walked through those rooms and memorized the layout, remained a total ghost. Meanwhile, both extortion cutoffs expired quietly. Check out what federal agents pulled off a security lens that the suspect previously snatched away right after. Tech units applied hardware hacking to rip data from the Nest device's memory board, spending roughly 10 days collaborating alongside Google to scrape leftover files off their digital servers. The team uncovered way more than just snapshots. Tied to the evening Nancy vanished, based on info from Fox News reporter Michael Ruse, who referenced 2 distinct police insiders. This restored footage held clips dating back to January 11th, 3 entire weeks prior to the abduction. It showed the exact same mysterious figure standing at that identical entryway. 0 bags, 0 weapons, 0 flashlights, 0 equipment, absolutely bare. Now compare that to what this very same prowler hauled along when he returned during the evening of January 31st. A dark Ozark Trail 25-liter rucksack, officially verified by investigators and later announced by sheriff. During a media briefing, Nanos verified a chest rig. The guy clenched a flashlight between his teeth and stored something in his shirt pocket. Newsweek covered the breakdown from ex-federal investigator Jennifer Coffendaffer, who pointed out that the handheld radio, it wasn't a jammer or a cell, was specifically meant for instant live conversations with somebody stationed somewhere else. Coffendaffer made it crystal clear exactly what that piece of evidence implies. A two-way radio simply isn't meant for a lone wolf. The person caught on that recording was supposedly chatting back and forth with a minimum of 1 accomplice that evening. They were stationed away from the scene, requiring synchronization while the whole thing went down. Genetic testing backed up this exact theory from an entirely new angle. Based on what Sheriff Nanos told NBC News on March 12th, crime scene technicians checking inside Nancy's residence found a blended genetic sample pointing to a minimum of 2 distinct people. Nancy wasn't a match for either one, and neither hit on any National CODIS system records. A pair of strangers, both completely off the authorities' radar, had definitely entered the residence. Next, compare that fact with the extortion letters, verified by federal operative Heath Janicki and covered by KOLD News 13 as well as TMZ. Those messages pinpointed exactly where her Apple Watch sat indoors and mentioned that her rear exterior security light was broken. Absolutely no police department or press organization had shared either of those facts with the public beforehand. You couldn't spot either of those things from the street either. The author of those demands absolutely had to have stood inside the place, observing things carefully enough to recall the exact spot a tiny gadget was stored, along with knowing which exterior bulb was dead. Ex-Bureau leader James Galliano talked about the investigation on Fox News and CNN, calling it extremely active, though he sharply judged the way officials handled their press releases. Retired federal investigator Steve Moore told Brian Enton that he figured the person of interest was an amateur who absolutely lacked any real tactical background or specialized skills. This evaluation carries a lot of weight, considering that if they weren't a pro and the figure on the surveillance video didn't actually have a history of doing Black Ops-style jobs then, all that obvious planning, showing up 3 weeks early, knowing the floor plan, bringing the handheld transceiver, the synchronized schedule didn't stem from sheer talent. It was the result of details that an insider handed over. An informant mentioned the entryway. Another person gave up the Apple Watch location. Somebody pointed out the broken yard fixture and her late-night routines. Nancy pulled into her automatic garage after hours, completely unaware. Plus, there was definitely an accomplice listening on the opposite side of that radio. Federal agents already verified a combined genetic sample belonging to a pair of strangers found in the residence. They also validated the radio seen on the security clips along with that January 11th scouting trip. The only thing they haven't announced to the world yet is the suspects' identities or who leaked the intel, making the whole crime doable. To catch every single twist as it breaks, hit that subscribe button for Cold Case Files USA today. The authorities are still digging, and our followers get all the fresh details immediately since the guy caught on. Tape clearly had a partner. That rear entrance didn't just stay unlocked by accident. Really, the biggest mystery surrounding the whole tragedy wasn't just about identifying the guy on screen. It was always about figuring out who gave him access. The Bureau wouldn't demand transaction receipts from a massive store for one particular bag style unless they were convinced that paper trail could provide an identity. That 25-liter Ozark trail bag hauled around by the person of interest is actually the Walmart exclusive item. Sheriff Nanos stated during a media briefing that federal investigators are teaming up with the retail giant to track down the buyer. That tactical vest seen in the clip happens to be another item from their shelves, while detectives also visited local firearm shops asking questions specifically regarding the rig's design. The cops aren't just fishing for random clues here. They are executing highly focused inquiries because the squad seems to be following a solid lead and just needs the paperwork to back it up. Meanwhile, the torch provides a completely separate trail of evidence. Arizona State University forensic science instructor April Stonehouse pointed out during a taped conversation with Brian Enton that seeing the person of interest biting down on the flashlight gives detectives an incredible chance to extract genetics. Spit left behind on the outer casing of a seized torch might produce a DNA match that either nails down a perpetrator or clears their name entirely. Based on what Stonehouse laid out, the feds are currently hunting for that specific tool. Based on the latest press updates, nobody has announced finding it yet. On February 5th, authorities took 42-year-old Derek Kayla into custody over in Hawthorne, California. The guy managed to dig up phone numbers for Nancy Guthrie and her spouse Tommaso before texted them extortion demands using a premium mobile app designed to hide the user's real information. Federal investigators tracked these digital trails back to a Google inbox registered under Kayla. Authorities indicted him for sending the fake threats. Government officials confirmed that Kala played absolutely zero part in actually kidnapping Nancy Guthrie. He simply watched. The investigation gained massive media coverage across the country and chose to take advantage. The legitimate extortion letters, which specifically mentioned her smart timepiece and the busted security lamp, were written by an entirely different suspect. The subsequent payoff, cutoff hit on February 9th without any money changing hands. Silence remained absolute, and nobody provided any evidence that she survived the ordeal. By the 39th day of searching, authorities pulled the search hounds. 41 days in Nancy's residence got handed over to her relatives once crime scene technicians finished their ultimate sweep. By day 45, federal agents headed out there again, Journalist Brian Enton reported, and local residents verified that investigators swept through the subdivision, knocking on doors to question folks regarding maintenance workers or housekeepers servicing nearby properties. They were not questioning folks about random pedestrians or sketchy cars, but rather individuals explicitly invited inside residences, permitted to stick around a while, and deemed reliable enough for unsupervised access. This specific interrogation tactic carries a clear underlying meaning. Detectives seemingly theorized that the private details mentioned throughout the threat letters, specifically knowing the exact location of a gadget, left resting indoors and identifying the exact exterior bulb that blew out weren't gathered by peering through windows. The intel originated internally. A nearby security lens issue still baffles everyone. The doorbell camera system owned by the neighbor crossed Nancy's backyard boundary, lost connection. During the evening, she vanished. Based on Brian Enton's coverage featuring that homeowner's personal testimony, this specific gadget hadn't ever displayed an offline error warning before. An insider working the inquiry characterized this glitch to Brian Enton as extremely bizarre. Detectives haven't officially linked it to the kidnapping yet. Furthermore, zero plausible reasoning exists on public record. Police impounded Nancy Guthrie's Honda CR-V for upwards of 40 days. Following updates from Brian Enton referencing external contacts, the SUV's computer network crashed once. Law enforcement pulled information off the internal drives needing professional dealership repairs prior to release. That automobile was subsequently restored to her loved ones. Her heart implant hasn't garnered as much media spotlight as the security clips or genetic evidence, yet detectives definitely aren't ignoring its potential. This medical hardware constantly records pulse metrics, sending the readings straight into company databases, automatically functioning completely independent of cellular devices or residential Wi-Fi networks. Police Chief Nanos verified this implant's presence, validating its recording capabilities during media briefings. The team at Cold Case Files USA similarly researched and documented these tracking features. Whatever those metrics revealed regarding the time frame spanning 2:28 a.m. through the next day's daylight hours alongside the theories detectives formulated based upon it remains entirely hidden from general citizens. During a March 12th segment, Chief Nanos spoke with NBC News reporters. The officer admitted to understanding the underlying reason driving this entire crime practically from day one. However, he kept that reasoning secret. During this exact conversation, he additionally mentioned that a primary suspect could potentially pull off another identical offense. We have an 84-year-old senior citizen unaccounted for. Whoever orchestrated this left genetic material belonging to two unknown suspects. They made a proven trip onto the premises 3 weeks before striking. Walkie-talkie proved they actively coordinated. Plus, the extortion letters held hidden facts that only somebody actually standing indoors could possibly spot. Yet the commander spearheading the search claims he understands exactly why everything unfolded. He's simply staying quiet. The chief declared the general public faced zero threat. He announced this on February 2nd, merely 24 hours after crime scene technicians discovered a bloody mess near Nancy Guthrie's main entrance. A single sunrise after extortion demands hit a regional news network's desk. Just a day following, his precinct officially verifying that an octogenarian in her 80s needing routine cardiac pills and incapable of strolling 50 feet unaided completely vanished from her residence, dead in the night. Supposedly zero threat to civilians existed. Everyday folks should simply relax. Everything was totally fine. Yet later on March 12th, this exact police chief confessed to NBC News that he actually realized the driving force behind this mystery from the exact moment the inquiry began, warning that the culprit could definitely strike in the exact same manner soon. These conflicting statements absolutely clash. Police Chief Chris Nanos hasn't openly clarified this massive contradiction whatsoever. This massive discrepancy falls into a broader history of shifting narratives that seasoned detectives flagged pretty fast and voiced concerns about. Once journalists started probing into the simple, verifiable detail regarding who taxied Nancy back, during the evening she vanished. Nanos provided contradictory responses during various pressers. Initially, he claimed Annie drove her. Next, he suggested Annie and Tommaso gave her a lift together. Following that, he pinned the ride completely on Tommaso. Ultimately, based on Brian Enton's digging, the chief instructed his public relations staff to drop the specifics entirely, demanding they stick with the family of words as a generic response. Security cameras clearly recorded the vehicle entering the parking structure at 9:48 p.m. The facts were crystal clear and fully recorded, yet the primary detective handling the inquiry was completely unable to provide a straight story to the press despite trying 4 distinct times. Richard Castigar Jr., a former county officer possessing extensive background experience in these types of situations, informed the Daily Mail that authority regarding the probe ought to have been officially handed over to the FBI a minimum of 2 weeks earlier. He called Nanos a typical control freak in assessment, implying that stalling the national authorities wasn't due to red tape, but rather driven by ego. Ex-FBI supervising agent James Galliano chatting independently with Fox News and CNN labeled the situation extremely volatile and openly blasted the way facts were being spun and distributed through the department's formal press briefings. Those comments weren't just spontaneous rants. They represented the calculated opinions of experts who have run national probes and could spot a completely botched operation just by looking from the outside. Processing the genetic material attracted the heaviest expert backlash once word got out that physical samples gathered at the incident location were sent over to DNA Labs International, an independent testing facility based out of Florida, instead of being routed to the federal government's main hub down in Quantico. That reaction from insiders within the national agencies was absolutely brutal. Multiple news outlets noted that this move was painted by various media channels as totally illogical during a national abduction probe, noting that the choice would inevitably force authorities to run every single test again from scratch prior to using the data in court. Nanos openly justified that his priority was keeping every piece of proof within one continuous tracking system at one spot. The FBI completely rejected this excuse as valid. The incident site was already unsealed anyway. Under 20 hours following the initial find, the house was handed back over looking so messy that reporters could literally record gore right by the main door. Nanos later faced the choice, directly dropping the phrase "Monday morning quarterback." Totally. A clear admission of clearing the site way too early, even if that realization came long after the damage was done. On top of everything else, the disconnect between public press releases and actual fieldwork grew so massive that it turned impossible to overlook. Nanos told the press that detectives lacked any identity for the suspects spotted on the security tapes. Meanwhile, based on Brian Enton's journalism, federal operatives actively working the streets were displaying pictures to workers around neighborhood shops requesting that they name the guy in the shots, claiming that they had nobody identified while simultaneously handing out images to possible bystanders for confirmation isn't just a minor discrepancy. It constitutes a blatant clash between the narrative fed to the community and the actual tactics unfolding in real time. Ex-FBI and CIA operative Tracy Walder raised a foundational issue that zero leaders have touched, namely if Nancy Guthrie was even the real mark of this plot, or if the true goal was grabbing her kid, Savannah, who is the famous anchor for NBC's Today Show, meaning Nancy just served as the easiest entry point. This inquiry remains entirely unverified. It hasn't been shut down either. There's a scenario regarding this mystery where every piece fits into a standard storyline. An abduction executed for cash, a hostage bargaining phase that broke down or paused alongside, a lady currently trapped alive at some unknown spot while detectives hustle to track her down. The authorities haven't officially dismissed that angle. However, the highest-ranking experts reviewing the known facts have recently started painting a completely alternative picture, not through whispered rumors, openly to the press while staking their reputations. John Miller worked as the second-in-command for the Federal Bureau. He chatted with CBS News regarding this matter, gave a very pointed take. Based on his expert perspective, the heist went sideways right out of the gate. He didn't sugarcoat his phrasing either. The plot failed instantly. He pushed this theory even deeper, suggesting that those extortion letters likely never served as actual requests for money whatsoever. His stance, per the reporting, claimed that these messages were probably written up after the tragedy took place, fabricated strictly to create the illusion of an active hostage situation, masking an ordeal that had already ended, all to throw detectives and civilians off the true scent and push a narrative about talks still happening. Paul Celino remains a seasoned murder investigator. His entire livelihood relies on his unique occupational talent for figuring out exactly what physical evidence exposes. Compared to what someone wants hidden, he gave the New York Post his bottom line without filtering it. I seriously doubt she got abducted. He formally shared his personal skepticism regarding if the standard hostage-taking theory really fits this situation whatsoever. We aren't talking about outside commentators here. These folks are seasoned federal agents who reached the top of their fields. They are the exact officials who constructed and managed abduction cases for the FBI, meaning they recognize the exact hallmarks of a real hostage situation. They reviewed the concrete evidence surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance and separately reached the exact same disturbing verdict. Their shared doubt carries so much weight because it comes down to one fundamental truth. Any legitimate abduction for money demands evidence the victim is still breathing. That isn't just some optional step. It is the core engine driving the entire scheme. If you cannot prove the target survived, your threats mean absolutely nothing. Relatives have zero incentive to pay up. That crucial bargaining chip vanishes. Anyone who has ever bargained with captors, every retired extraction expert, and every single detective familiar with these crimes knows this fact. A real kidnapper never goes completely quiet once their time limit expires. Going dark isn't some clever bargaining tactic, it signals a void. In this situation, 2 separate cutoffs expired in total silence. February 5th passed by. February 9th also drifted past. We saw 0 pictures, received 0 calls, and heard nothing verifiable to prove that Nancy Guthrie survived the ordeal. Ex-Federal Bureau of Investigation Specialist Jennifer Coffindaffer actively monitored the ongoing probe and previously broke down the 2-way radio seen on the security tape, determining that it proved direct teamwork with a minimum of 1 accomplice. On March 10th, she announced online that the hunting stage of the inquiry had concluded. She mentioned the outlook was glass half full. While she didn't expand on those specific terms, the phrasing came from an expert who dedicated her entire professional life to carefully measuring her statements. The scent hounds were actually pulled 11 days prior on day 39. Now compare those details against the hard evidence. Our main suspect showed up at the house on January 11th totally empty-handed and took no action. 3 weeks later, he came back sporting a stuffed rucksack, a weapon harness, a tactical light, and a 2-way radio. This guy knew intimate details about the house's layout that demanded inside access, like precisely where a gadget sat in a bedroom and the broken state of a backyard floodlight. We know a minimum of 2 suspects entered the residence, proven by blended genetic material from 2 unknown subjects not found in the National Registry. The camera, owned by the backyard neighbor, strangely disconnected for the first and only time that very evening. Fox News reported a nearby power terminal sustained damage and drew police scrutiny, even though authorities haven't officially linked it to the crime just yet. Peak One left us wondering one massive thing. What really went down indoors and who was? On the other end of that radio signal, the heavy consensus among professionals right now suggests that the extortion letters were written after the primary incident finished acting purely as a decoy rather than a real shakedown. It was a fabricated tale designed to throw detectives off the trail while the real plot unfolded elsewhere. That echoes exactly what John Miller stated. It perfectly matches Paul Celino's absolute certainty. And it mirrors Jennifer Coffindaffer's hint when she claimed the manhunt phase had wrapped up. If this theory holds water, the rear entrance wasn't breached to set up a hostage drop. It was left ajar to hide whatever the perpetrators urgently needed to mask with a completely fabricated narrative. The local sheriff figured out the true motive on day 1. He just refuses to disclose it. Share this video right away. The only way a crucial witness might stumble across this breakdown is if you keep spreading it, so hit share. 46 days later, inquiry laid down some groundwork while leaving several huge mysteries. That underlying framework simply cannot solve everything yet. Here is what we absolutely know for a fact. A minimum of 2 suspects breached Nancy Guthrie's residence. Neither genetic footprint triggered a match in the national CODIS system, meaning these guys don't have previous felony records that would put their swabs on file. The main perp caught on the security cameras actually scoped out the house 3 weeks prior to coming back, geared up for the hit. He brought a transceiver, proving he was talking. Live with a minimum of 1 partner during the break-in. Those extortion letters included inside information regarding the layout that cops never disclosed and nobody could see from the street. The exact spot where a specific gadget sat indoors, plus the broken bulb out back. Nancy's heart monitor disconnected from her cell at 2:08 in the morning. Her prescriptions and her Apple Watch never left the house. The porch camera was manually ripped down and stolen from the property. The bloodstains by the doorway belonged to her. That is the undisputed timeline. Each piece of this puzzle comes straight from police briefings, verified media updates, or official federal reports. What remains an absolute mystery is the identity of those 2 suspects, exactly how they mapped out the inside of the house and who leaked that floor plan, plus if that busted electrical box by the property, which Fox News pointed out. And detectives admitted they are currently looking into actually ties into what went down that evening or is just a random fluke. We also have to wonder why the backdoor neighbor's security system suddenly lost its connection on that exact evening, considering it had never dropped signal before. Authorities are also questioning if the suspect's weekend-only movements caught on. January 11th, and brought up by federal agents looking into January 24th, points to someone working a standard Monday through Friday job. Then there is the matter of her heart device, which constantly beams vital signs straight to the medical company's database, completely bypassing any Wi-Fi or cellular connection. What exactly did it register from 2:28 a.m. until her relatives realized Nancy was missing? As for the solid leads currently being worked on, federal authorities have officially demanded transaction histories from Walmart regarding that specific Ozark trail bag and tactical rig. Local firearms dealers are also being interviewed to see if anyone bought that exact gear. By day 45 of the search, the feds came back to the subdivision, skipping the usual door knocking to laser focus on handyman maids and basically anybody who had legit permission to be inside houses around that block. They are digging there because of a very clear theory. Whoever wrote the details in those extortion letters must have walked right through the main entrance with a solid excuse. Savannah Guthrie is putting up $1 million in reward money for any tip that helps crack the case. Her sibling Cameron, an aviator in the armed forces, has been begging the public for help. The whole family is fully collaborating with the feds. Our team at Cold Case Files USA managed to track down Dominic Evans. As someone whose potential ties to this whole nightmare seriously demand a closer look, Evans has apparently been friends for 19 years, with Tommaso Cian, the final guy definitively known to be with Nancy before she vanished. This person actually has a rap sheet featuring burglary and larceny charges. Based on our own exclusive digging, his bodily appearance supposedly lines up perfectly with the federal suspect profile right down to his size frame, ink on his right forearm, and a piece of jewelry on his pinky. Keep in mind, this is all just speculation. The authorities have not validated any of it yet. No one has formally indicted Evans for anything related to this mystery, and we are only mentioning him right now in the spirit of active, unofficial investigative reporting. The devastating truth is that Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Nobody has seen concrete evidence that she is breathing, nor is there any official word saying she is dead. This investigation is absolutely active. The feds are heavily involved. Local police clearly have secrets they are hiding and somewhere floating around. In all that chaos, the actual truth is coming together. Looking closely, this nightmare highlights two very real takeaways regarding the way predators plot their attacks and how the cops jumping into the mix can either speed up justice or completely ruin the whole process. The first big takeaway is all about stalking ahead of time. The prime suspects scoped out Nancy Guthrie's house back on January 11th, completely empty-handed, and took off without doing a thing. He showed up 20 days after that, armed and ready. That gap was pure casing paired with calculated planning, which is a textbook psychological trait when hunting down vulnerable seniors who live solo and stick to predictable habits. That January 11th scouting trip was only caught because her smart doorbell managed to upload footage to the internet right before the actual hardware got smashed to pieces. Pulling that video out using direct microchip extraction and roughly 10 days of teaming up with Google proves exactly why you need off-site video storage instead of local hard drives. The camera itself might get ripped right off the porch, but the digital backup stays safe. The other massive takeaway here shines a light on the heavy price tag of making sloppy mistakes on day one, sending biological traces to an independent lab instead of a government branch, letting people walk through the house before the forensics team finishes, and having the main detective go on TV and completely butcher the actual facts does way more than just ruin the department's reputation. It infects the core foundation of the prosecution, causing major setbacks, forcing them to run labs all over again, and creating obvious loopholes that a smart lawyer will absolutely use in court down the line. What this disaster screams about police responsibility is crystal clear. When dealing with a national kidnapping crisis, the choices detectives make during those initial 24 hours are far from mere paperwork. They build the entire foundation. We at Cold Case Files USA expose these flaws because putting it all out there is literally the only way to actually hold these officials' feet to the fire. Tommaso Cian brought Nancy Guthrie back home at 9:48 p.m. on January 31st. The garage shut at 9:50. The son-in-law drove off. That is the final piece of verified footage anyone holds. Once those hinges shut, she faced whatever nightmare was waiting completely by herself. Meanwhile, the individuals responsible for making that happen are still walking completely free today. Every single clue discovered following that exact second, the bloody doorway, the genetic material left by 2 unidentified suspects. The two-way radio, the letters revealing extremely private insider details, along with the local police chief, who figured out the exact motive early on, but remains completely tight-lipped, all feeds into a massive probe, working to construct a solid resolution piece by piece until the entire mystery gets solved. Nancy Guthrie is a beloved mom. She enjoyed Friday night card games. She required physical assistance just to navigate around her own house. Her daily pills sat abandoned. She needs to be brought home while the culprits absolutely must pay for their crimes. If you are watching this clip, hit the thumbs up button to boost our algorithm. Follow Cold Case Files USA to ensure every breaking development hits your screen immediately. Our next unsolved mystery is already queued up. Behind the locked doors of a quiet home in Tucson, a sanctuary was shattered. Nancy Guthrie wasn't just a name in a police file. She was a mother who cherished Friday night card games and the warm presence of her family. Her disappearance is a haunting reminder that the most vulnerable among us, our elders, carry a fragility we often forget to protect. They are the living bridges to our history, yet they often stand alone when the sun goes down. This tragedy teaches us that safety is never a guarantee. It is a promise we must keep through vigilance and compassion. When a predator stalks a porch or an insider betrays a trust, it is a failure of our collective shield. We must become the eyes for those who can no longer see the danger lurking in the moonlight. Look closer at the stranger on your street. Check on the neighbor who lives alone. Hold your loved ones closer tonight because a lifetime of routine can be stolen in a heartbeat. Let Nancy's story be the spark that ignites a fire of protection around our seniors. When we allow the darkness to take one of our own, we all lose a piece of our humanity. Stay alert, stay kind, and never let the silence win.